What's on, ladies and gentlemen? My name's Ross, I like games, and today we need to do one of my favourite things when a new Keyforge set comes out. Because you see, there is an algorithm that creates these Keyforge decks. And the algorithm has certain rules in it. These cards always come together. Think things like Time Traveller and Help from Future Self. And we looked at a video just a day or two ago about how some cards like Tesmal and Binding Irons will only arrive as two ofs, you cannot get more than two. And I find all of that stuff endlessly fascinating, which is why I make videos on it. For anyone I haven't told, my rule with videos is make videos that I'd want to watch. Make videos on stuff that I find interesting. Well, the thing I find most interesting is the cards that are deemed so gosh darn good, we're only allowed one of them in each of our decks. And the good news is people have been data mining, people have found out which ones they are. So let's have a look. And the vast majority of these are actually reprints. There's the first category, and then there's only two more that are actually new in Age of Ascension. Speaking of the first category, the Shards. I haven't done my video ranking the Shards yet, I really need to get on to that. But all of the Shards, ladies and gentlemen, they only come around as one-offs. Now, like I told you in the video the other day, you can get 3 Shards per deck, but there are 3 houses and you can only get 1 Shard per house per deck. So you can have a Mars, a Shadows, a Dis, and that's fine, but you cannot have more than 1 Mars. Now, I believe there's 2 reasons for this. First of all, if you could have, say, 2 Mars, 2 Shard of Greed, then you could potentially have 2 Shard of Greed, and then 2 Shard of Pain, and then 2 Shard of Greed, and then all of a sudden you're potentially doing 6, 9 a turn. I probably should explain what Shards do, shouldn't I? Shard of Greed, they're all artifacts of actions. Shard of Greed gains 1 amber for each friendly shard. Shard of Hate stuns an enemy creature for each friendly shard. Shard of Hope captures an amber onto a friendly creature for each friendly shard. Shard of Knowledge draws a card for each friendly shard. Shard of Life shuffles a card from your discard pile into your deck for each friendly shard. Shard of Pain deals 1 damage to an enemy creature for each friendly shard. And Shard of Strength gives a friendly creature a +1 power counter for each friendly shard. And the weird thing is, by introducing this rule for Shards, they're not actually limiting Shards to 1 per deck, they're limiting Shards to 3 per deck. Because remember, you can get a Shard per house. So I get that. They don't want you doing something like using Shard of Greed to gain 9 amber in a turn. I mean, using Shard of Greed to gain 3 amber, because you've also got Shards in your other 2 houses, turns it into Virtuous Works, which was, according to the survey I did, the best Sanctum card back in Wave 1. So I get this. It's to stop you going over the top silly. Now, there are 2 other new cards here that are one-offs. And the first one is Swindle. And I find Swindle endlessly fascinating. Because Swindle is both an alpha and omega card. It is both the first and the last thing that you get to do during your turn. If you've done anything else, other than Forge a Key, you don't get to use it. And after you've used it, you don't get to do anything else. What is really interesting, I'm assuming other people have noticed this, it is the only card in the entire set that has both Alpha and Omega. To be fair, there aren't many that have Omega, there's like 5. But the point is, it's the only Alpha and Omega card in the set. And it just steals 3 amber, and that's your turn. You forge a key if you're able, you play this, and then that's it. That is the end of your turn, you are done. And yet, we saw in the Vault Tour in Birmingham, it saw a lot of play, and people were really not afraid to pick decks of it in, and far more than that, they were not afraid to play it when they had it in a deck. People seem to have decided that this is a really gosh darn good card. And now that we know that we've got the errata to bait and switch, which basically means if your opponent's got 2 or more amber than you just steal 2 amber, this becomes a really good stealing card. Bearing in mind, a lot of the time, we can talk about board position and building up your battle line and all of that, But a lot of the time in Keyforge, there are two things that you want to do during your turn. Get closer to forging, stop your opponent forging. This does both of them. I find it a bit weird that you can't have more than one of these in a deck because, honestly, it doesn't seem over the top broken. Okay, it's good, but doing this turn after turn means you're not building up a battle line, you're not removing any of your opponent's creatures, so they can do this while you're just playing a bunch of creatures. I'm not sure I entirely agree with this one. And the other new one we're getting is Niffle Grounds. Now, Niffle Grounds is one of those new artifacts. It's coming from the Untamed house, and it's got an action. Choose a creature. For the remainder of the turn, that creature loses Taunt and Elusive. This basically lets you go after anything. And the two things that would generally stop you going after a creature are Taunt and Elusive. So this basically means you can go after creatures that have been protected. But then again, you've got things like Lemindra, which has got the new deploy keyword skill and means you can put it anywhere in the battle line. But then it gives both of its neighbours Elusive. Elusive makes creatures better. Elusive is put on what might be bad creatures to turn them into fairly decent creatures. And what Niffle Grounds does is it basically goes, oh, yeah, I'm just going to ignore that and go after you anyway. And the fact of the matter is that as much as we've got plenty of ways to get rid of artifacts, barehanded comes to mind, it's still far more difficult to get rid of artifacts than it is to get rid of creatures. So honestly, ladies and gentlemen, I get this. We don't want somebody having 3 or 4 Niffle Grounds and just being able to take out any creature they want and basically making a mockery of the whole Taunt and Elusive thing. Now, they are the new ones in this particular set. At least I think they're the new ones. If I made any mistakes, please do let me know. Now, we did go over the ones from Call of the Archons in a previous video. I'll link it in the description, but I will run through them rather quickly now. We've got Burn the Stockpile. Burn the Stockpile is a really nice card from Brobnar, and it reads, if your opponent has 7 amber or more, they lose 4. And the thing is, this gets rid of a lot of amber. So something like Effervescent Principle isn't limited, but Effervescent Principle is for you and your opponent. Each player loses half of their amber rounding down. At least I don't think that's limited to 1. Similarly, Doorstep to Heaven isn't limited. But Doorstep to Heaven, which is one of my favourite anti-reaping cards, maybe my very favourite, reads each player with 6 amber or more is reduced to 5. So actually, this hurts both players. The thing about Burn the Stockpile is, it just hurts your opponent. And okay, fine, there's not going to be that many turns where they've got 7 amber or more, you play this and they've still got it. But there are going to be turns. And there are going to be games where you can just play it turn after turn after turn after turn after turn. And honestly, it can lock your opponent out of the game in a way that isn't fun. And please do remember the goal of Keyforge of any game, and game is pretty crucial here, is that it's supposed to be fun. That's why we errated bait and switch. Because bait and switch took games and swung them too dramatically, and we didn't love it. Lash of Broken Dreams is a fairly straightforward one. It's an artifact with an action, and when you use Lash of Broken Dreams, your opponent's keys cost +3 to forge. Well, if you could have 3 or 4 of these in one go, it would just be rubbish. It would mean your opponent's keys would cost 6, 9, 12 extra next turn. Except it's an action on an artifact, so your opponent could just keep going. And again, it stops the game being fun. It slows down the game. And like I've said about Artifact Hate, it would not be fun to play against that one person who got 3 Lash of Broken Dreams. I did see a game over in Birmingham where the lovely Alex, who was on the stream with us, he had 2 Proclamation 346E played against him by Josh, who was also on the stream, who also had a Lash of Broken Dreams, and it was costing like 13 to forge a key. The reason why Proclamation isn't limited, incidentally, is because if you can get creatures from 3 different houses out, Proclamation gets turned off, So for that reason, you can kind of understand it. Incidentally, if you can get this with some board wipes like Unlocked Gateway, for instance, that could be fun, ladies and gentlemen. That could be fun. Look out for that deck, incidentally. A couple of Proclamation plus Unlocked Gateway would be a real whole heap of fun to have. Restringuntus, we had previously talked about. Restringuntus, it's the same reason why Tesmal is limited to 2, and the reason why Tesmal and Restringuntus will not turn up in the same deck. When you play Restringuntus, your opponent cannot choose a particular house. We don't want a situation where you can lock your opponent out of houses by playing 3 of them in the same turn, for instance. So for that reason, we've got to limit it. Replicator's an interesting one that also will not turn up as more than 1. And what's interesting about Replicator is when you reap, you trigger the reap effect of another creature in play as if you controlled that creature. Now, I think there's a little bit of future-proofing going on here, in that they don't know what reap effects will be printed in the future, but this is to stop any potentially broken combos here. I mean, Tesmal, you've got to think, is coming in here, because if you're using Replicator, and you've potentially got 3 Replicator, and your opponent's got a Tesmal on the field, then you could basically use Tesmal 3 times to lock your opponent out of a house. And remember what I said in my previous video, I will link that in the description if I didn't already say that. We don't want to lock our opponent out of having a house. That's no fun. Remember, goal of the game, fun. And you can see that most of these limits to 1 are purely here to stop situations where your opponent's not going to be able to play the game, and it's no fun. Now, the last couple we need to talk about here are Key Charge and CHOTA HAZRI. Now, they do the exact same thing. Key Charge is an action. CHOTA HAZRI has a coming into play skill, but they both do the same thing. You lose an amber, and then you forge a key at current cost. Why is it not just forge a key at +1 cost? Because it means if you play CHOTA HAZRI and you're not able to forge a key, you still lose the amber. Fun side note. And again, we just don't want to create situations where your opponent can just... And let's remember, right, that Untamed has stuff like Full Moon, which every time you play a creature, you gain an amber. We don't want to have, hey, I've got 2 Full Moon and 10 creatures in a deck, 3 of which are CHOTA HAZRI, and I'm just going to force 2 or 3 keys in one go. That's just no fun. Now, don't get me wrong, you can always use stuff like Nepenthe Seed to potentially reuse some of these cards, but as I've shown you in this video, the whole point of this is let's try and make it fun. Let's try and make sure that people can actually play the game. That doesn't mean we're not going to have some decks that are overwhelmingly great, because if every deck was mediocre, again, that wouldn't be fun. We wouldn't want that constantly. But the point here is that what we're doing is trying to create a good gaming environment, and having any of these cards as more than a one-off would kind of ruin that. And I hope I've shown you in this video, ladies and gentlemen, why that would be. So there we go. If there are any of these that you disagree as being one-offs, or if there are any other cards that you think actually should be one-offs, should be limited, let me know in the comments section. Go nuts, be nice. And then make sure you like this video, subscribe to this channel, and follow me on Twitter at the Wossy, where we talk about games like Transformers, but also Keyforge, Pokemon, Final Fantasy, whatever takes my fancy. But by far the most important thing as always, look after yourselves till next time. Thank you very much for watching. My name's Ross, and you've been watching Wossy Plays.